Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics. Make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe, as well as hit the notification button so you don't miss another video just like this. We will be starting in a brand new setup and expand the show quite greatly with a morning show on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. at an unclosed date as of right now. And I will be starting another new podcast sometime soon with a new co-host. So that will be very interesting once that time comes. And we have officially debuted a brand new logo for the channel as of right now, which you can see in the profile picture on the YouTube account. Looking at the Electoral College map between J.D. Vance and Pete Buttigieg, we will see that there's actually quite something interesting that I have found in the demographics of this. We have a Google Sheets model that basically comprises of a lot of demographics, potentially over 100 different sub-demographics that you can shift and change the turnout by party, change the overall turnout, adjust the third-party groups, and do all these different things in order to get a brand new map which goes county by county and creates brand new projections based on raw vote totals from the 2024 election and can create brand new electoral college maps. And so today we're looking at what I believe the J.D. Vance versus Pete Buttigieg election will look like on the electoral map. So one of the pretty much most obvious things as of right now, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, the Dakotas, all of Nebraska as of right now is in that column, and not including the first congressional district. So the congressional district is actually not in the safe column, the first or the second one. Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, Indiana, West Virginia, and South Carolina are all in the safe Republican column, including the states of Iowa and Ohio, which now fall in the safe column at about 14.5 points for the state of Iowa, which actually, if you go over here, the last election was a 13.2 percentage point win for Iowa, or for President Trump in the state of Iowa, which shows that the white vote is continuing to shift Republican despite the incumbent administration's performance. And looking at Ohio, we see something similar where J.D. Vance wins the state by 12.3%. This is an improvement from the last cycle where Trump won the state by 11.2%. So both Iowa and Ohio shift about a point to the right in this general election. However, that is actually it, except for Maine's second congressional district. Believe it or not, in this election cycle, Maine's second congressional district actually falls in the safe Republican column, which again is very, very interesting. And it is mainly because of the English vote really swinging to the right in this election cycle. There's definitely going to be something there that a lot of people, I think, are going to be surprised by in this forecast. But that is the second congressional district of Maine. It is a 17-point win for Vance, which is almost double the margin of the last election. And so this state potentially becomes a battleground state with Pete Buttigieg as the Democrat nominee, and he underperforms quite extensively in the northeastern area in some portions of that area. Looking at the safe Democrat states, we have California, Oregon, Washington, the state of Hawaii, Colorado, as well as New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, as well as Connecticut, Rhode Island, Delaware, Maryland, and D.C., all falling in the safe category, including Maine's first congressional district, which also comes in at a 17-point margin for Pete Buttigieg. Looking at the state of California, as of right now, Buttigieg wins the state by about 24 percentage points as of right now, with about 9.7 million votes in the state to Vance's 5.9 million, which is just below what Trump got in the last election. But Buttigieg is overperforming Harris's vote total in the state of California by just a couple points, with some Hispanic and suburban voters. Oregon, a 17.8 percentage point win for Pete Buttigieg, and Washington, 23-point victory for Pete Buttigieg there In Colorado, we see about a 15.6 percentage point win, a 520,000 vote margin separating both candidates. In New York, a 13-point win, which is just a little bit of a shift away from the last election. In New York, actually, this is not really a big shift. The state only shifts about half a point to the left. And looking at the shift map, this is really because a lot of the suburban areas actually end up shifting left. A lot of the rural counties in New York actually end up shifting massively to the left, but some of these city areas kind of narrowly budge left, and some of the suburban areas and college towns. And so that's where you kind of get that performance in the state. And again, looking at Maryland, that's a 33-point win for Pete Buttigieg. Delaware is a little bit closer, given Buttigieg's weakness with Black voters. Connecticut and Rhode Island, we see shift a little bit to the left. Massachusetts shifts left. Vermont actually ends up moving Republican. So that's an interesting observation there. And so that is it for the safe states for both candidates, both of them at an equal standing. The likely Republican states put Texas and Florida in the likely GOP category, as well as the state of Alaska, putting Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance at 218, with Nebraska's first congressional district going in that likely column at just an 8-point win for Vance. Trump actually won this district by 13 points, but given the suburban shifts in Nebraska, despite it only moving about a point to the left, you do get a pretty substantial shift in Nebraska's first congressional district to the left. And so that kind of ends up making the state somewhat interesting to look at in terms of its electoral demographics. And Texas coming in at 10.7%, so a 3-point shift to the left. Vance is actually getting, if you actually look at the state of Texas from the last election cycle, Vance actually gets more votes than Donald Trump in the state, but Pete Buttigieg kind of gets a little bit more turnout than Harris. He actually ends up improving massively in some of these southern counties, so he actually does a little bit better near the border, which is quite interesting. And we can even look at the county map here. Vance actually ends up doing very well in some of these rural areas and even some of the suburban areas. But we see like Tarrant County kind of gets closer, Collin gets closer. Some of these, kind of border counties, a lot of them are still very Republican, but some of them do actually flip back. However, Jim Hogg County, which is a county that Harris actually won by 8 points, still gets closer for Vance. So he does improve there. Brooks County, on the other hand, it stays about the same. So it's kind of like a play-for-play type of shift. But overall, if you really look at it, Vance still somewhat holds his ground in the area because some of the border counties actually do get more Republicans. Some of them get closer. So there's a little bit of a mix. You can actually pull them up here on the county shift map here. And you see the reason why Vance ends up doing a little bit worse in the state is because the suburban areas and the exurban areas kind of end up moving left. But he holds some ground with these really massive rural shifts. And you can see it across the country that there's these crazy rural shifts to the right, especially in the Black areas of the country. That's where Vance does the most, has the most improvement due to his support with Black voters, due to Pete Buttigieg being the nominee. So that's where you're really going to see a lot of movement away from the Democrat Party, is a lot of the rural areas in the country. But we see even the border areas. I mean, yeah, Pete Buttigieg does a little bit better in some places, but even in some of the rural, some of the border counties, Vance actually does better. So, it is actually quite interesting to see that take place, where the Hispanic shift is there for Buttigieg. He does improve narrowly in some of the counties. He does improve narrowly in some counties here. The Hispanic counties kind of end up moving a certain way, but it's not enough to make a big of a difference. It's not enough to offset the shift in all of the white counties that you see here, where Vance is doing sometimes huge double-digit numbers improvement over Trump in 2024. And really the reason why that happens is mainly because of Pete's candidacy as a very more liberal type of Democrat, and the fact that he is a homosexual man, which I think is really going to not play well in this area of the country right here in the deep South, I think that's really going to affect him negatively there. And I do see it being a bit of a problem for Pete Buttigieg. And that's why you see the margins that you see in some of the states that I have. And looking at, some of the other states, for example, like even Florida, which is another interesting one. If you look at the state of Florida, what's quite interesting is, Duvall actually ends up moving left. And usually that means Georgia would move left, right? Because they have a pretty similar relationship. But, and what ends up happening is, yes, the suburbs of Georgia move left, but the rural areas and the Black Belt area actually ends up getting significantly more Republican. So, like, if you look at, the state of Georgia, for example, you're going to notice very quickly that there is a pretty significant of blue around here, right? There is a significant amount of blue counties in Georgia in this kind of, Bible Belt area. But if you look at the state here, you actually see that a lot of these counties end up completely shifting away from Pete Buttigieg. And again, in the Democrat primary, he gets 0% of the black vote. And this translates to the general election where his performance with black voters goes down the tubes in a lot of places. Now, Vance does win Broward County, or doesn't win Palm Beach County. He does a little bit worse in Broward County. So really the black voters that Vance does the most improvement with is like your Bible Belt black voter, and that's where Vance's gains will come from the most. But like if you're in a suburban area, you're not going to really see a big improvement with those type of people. Even Miami-Dade actually gets a little bit closer for Vance. However, even though Hillsborough flips, Pinellas County does not flip back. Duval County flips very narrowly in this election. And it doesn't even actually track with Georgia because although it matches the suburban shift in these kind of like Atlanta counties, it does not track with the shift in the rural counties. And Vance actually has a slight improvement in the state of Georgia, believe it or not, of just about half a point there. And both candidates actually get more votes than they did in the last election from both of their candidates. So it's just kind of an increase in turnout that really determines that margin there. So that's really what you're seeing in the state of Florida and Texas, and kind of comparing Florida's Duval with Georgia. That's really what you're getting there. But looking at the likely Democrat states, New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, New Jersey are all in that likely category, as well as Nebraska's second congressional district, which comes in at a 10-point victory in the state. And we actually see that Nebraska's third actually gets more Republican. So that's why the state doesn't really end up shifting that liberal. But we see like New Mexico, for example, if you look at the shift map here, Los Alamos County ends up shifting 6 points to the left. Bardino County ends up shifting. Santa Fe. That kind of makes the state move a little bit to the left, despite some of the other shifts. And it kind of shifts like 3.5 points to the left. And Pete Buttigieg is getting about 520,000 votes in the state of New Mexico, winning it by almost 100,000 votes, believe it or not. And we can see in the shift map in Minnesota, although the red counties, the rural counties, end up getting a lot more Republican on this map, the suburban and urban counties end up shifting so much more to the left that you end up getting a pretty polarized version of Minnesota where Lake County's going Republican, but the state isn't flipping. And then you have like all of these like exurban areas and suburban areas actually flipping Democrat for the first time in quite a while. So it's really interesting stuff to see in the state there. So that's what you're seeing in Minnesota. So looking at the counties in the state of Virginia, you're really seeing this rural divide here where you see the rural county shifting right, but the city areas are actually shifting left. And that produces a pretty blue version of Virginia where Pete Buttigieg is actually quite easily winning it in our forecast by about almost 9 points and is winning it by about 500,000 votes. So Trump actually, Vance actually maintains the support level from the previous election there, but it's really Pete Buttigieg kind of gains some votes in Virginia from there. And in New Jersey, you actually see that even there, Vance is actually underperforming Trump, and you actually see a little bit of an improvement there for Pete Buttigieg. And really, you see like Passaic County barely shift left, but like it's really these suburban areas that are really the ones that are shifting quite left. Because even like Salem County and like Cumberland, like a lot of them are not shifting left. Even like Sussex County and Warren County shift left or right, but it's really like these suburban areas again that are kind of making the state move in that direction. So that's really where the massive shift is coming from there. And then if you look at New York, I mean, really the only reason why the state is stagnating is because a lot of these counties really shift Republican a lot. But in the city area, you see like New York County ends up shifting left. Richmond County does shift Republican. Kings County, some of the black areas don't really shift left much, but like New York County, where a lot of the whiter vote, believe it or not, is actually what ends up making the state kind of end up budging to the left by just a little bit. So that's what you're really seeing there. And because of that, a lot of states that Trump made competitive in 24 on this map wouldn't particularly have the same status as before. And a lot of these have some diverse communities that kind of make it that way. And even Illinois is going in that likely column at about 11.5%. It's actually not that much of a shift to the left, believe it or not. It's actually really not that much. And again, the reason why that's the case is because if you look, all the rural counties are like having these humongous shifts. And even Cook County only shifts like a point left. It doesn't really even have this like huge marginal shift either. So that's really interesting. Champaign County ends up shifting about 11 points to the left. So if we were to go there, we would already see that that's a pretty blue area. And, Cook County's not really shifting a lot, but you do see like a lot of these rural areas shift massively to the right. So that's really what you're seeing here. It's an even further divide of rural and urban America is really what you're getting in this election. And looking at the lean states, starting with the lean Republican states, we're going to have quite a few. Those include Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, bringing Vance over 270 and putting him at the 296 mark as of right now. And again, looking at Arizona, we see that Vance wins the state by about 2.4%, which is an underperformance for Vance from Trump. And this is because, Buttigieg does a little bit better in the Hispanic parts of the state, but even like Apache County is a lot closer. Like that was not a 5-point win for Trump. Harris won that county by 19 points. And we see here that Buttigieg is only winning it by 6. So there are some parts of the state that end up shift Republican, and that kind of actually saves the state from actually moving so much to the left, despite Maricopa actually end up shifting Democrat. But really, Vance doesn't lose votes here. It's really just Buttigieg kind of turns out a little bit more people, and both candidates get about 1 million votes in the county, making it one of its like really high turnout elections, making it like one of the highest turnouts you ever seen in the state of Arizona. But that's really where that is coming into play. Georgia, we already discussed that in its shift. North Carolina, really the reason why that state shifts so much in this election is because even though some of the left areas, like some of the suburban areas like Orange County, Durham, and Wake County, and like Mecklenburg, they kind of shift left there. The rural counties and even the northeastern counties actually have the biggest shifts to the right. And this is because Pete Buttigieg as a candidate for the black vote is absolutely horrible in this stronghold where usually Republicans aren't doing so great in. I mean, even in 2024, Trump didn't exactly, win this area outright. I mean, he did okay, but he didn't win some counties. But you legitimately have counties that like Trump didn't even win in the last election that are straight up like competitive or even going like Northampton flipped to Trump here by 3.4%. It is a complete reversion of what you saw in the last election there. And so that's why the state ends up moving about a point and change to the Republicans. And then in Pennsylvania, I mean, yes, you do see like Bucks County shifts back left a little bit. Some of these like suburban areas shift left, but like Northampton stays and Lackawanna actually flips Republican, and Erie County gets more Republican, and Philadelphia actually ends up shifting about 6 points Republican, which produces about a 4.5 percentage point margin for the state of Pennsylvania. And both candidates get more votes, by the way. So it's an even higher turnout election than last time. And Vance wins the state quite easily. And even in Michigan, both candidates, again, produce more votes. But you'll see in Michigan that you just have a disaster. Because, yes, if you look at Michigan, for example, you'll see that really what ends up making the state more Republican, you do have, again, the suburban areas do shift left. Even Macomb County shifts left, but like Wayne still shifts about a point to a quarter point to the right. You see all these rural areas really continuing to shift right by ridiculous amounts. And it's because of the weakness of Pete Buttigieg as a Democrat candidate. And even like in Wisconsin, you have, even in Wisconsin, you have Ashland County flip to Vance, and Door County ends up completely swinging to Vance. But you have like Ozaukee end up getting closer, Kenosha gets closer, but Portage flips to Vance. So does like Iowa County and a lot of these other places. But you do see like Dane County gets a lot bluer. Milwaukee actually ends up, believe it or not, Milwaukee, I actually think ends up getting a little bit more blue. So really, it's again another urban-rural divide. And you see here, like Ozaukee shifts left. You see like in Milwaukee, it's a little bit of a shift left. Waukesha shifts left. In Racine and Kenosha, barely any shift there. Dane County shifts 10 points to the left, but like all these rural shifts really are just outmatching the Republicans there. It's just really a disaster for the Democrats in the rural areas of the state. And that's why Vance is actually able to hold on to Wisconsin. And then even in Nevada, like Buttigieg isn't winning them by enough. He's not winning Washoe and Clark by enough to flip the state. And the rural areas of the state also end up shifting Republican as well. And that just really produces like a really big disaster for the Democrats in the state as well. So in reality, it's also not enough to end up flipping Nevada either, which then produces about a tilt margin for both Wisconsin and Nevada. I mean, Nevada, it's only like a point Republican, but it still goes to Vance. In Wisconsin, it's actually a bigger margin for Vance in Wisconsin than it was for Trump, but it's still below the 2-point threshold. Before, all the states were under 2 points. Now Pennsylvania and Michigan are over that threshold as of right now, with Pennsylvania and North Carolina being the most Republican. And believe it or not, the most Republican swing state is actually Pennsylvania, even more so than North Carolina, believe it or not. So actually, that is the biggest marginal shift there, believe it or not. Actually, Pennsylvania ends up becoming the most Republican swing state out of the 6 main crucial battlegrounds. You know, like Arizona last time was the best state for Donald Trump. Now, this time, Pennsylvania is actually Vance's best swing state, with Nevada actually being his worst one. So that is also an interesting development. And then in New Hampshire and Maine, both of them narrow up quite significantly down to a tilt margin on the map. And what's very fascinating is New Hampshire, you do have, again, some of the more exurban areas and rural areas shift left or right, but it's not quite enough. There's actually pretty much almost a universal shift to the right in New Hampshire, but it's not enough to flip the state. And even in Maine, you pretty much have a universal shift to the right, but it's not quite enough to flip both states into the column. I mean, if they were to both flip, Vance would be out there with 318 in the Electoral College. And since Vance's coalition is wider, that's why you end up getting those type of states to shift in his favor, despite other areas end up moving left, like, you know, some of the blue states from 24 and like Texas and Florida, because their suburban population, minority population shift left. But with Vance on the ticket, the black and white vote ends up shifting a little bit to the right, just enough where Vance can really exploit that. And you really see that come out in like Michigan and Pennsylvania. Like that's really where you see the black vote also really end up showing out for Vance, is like in Philadelphia or in Wayne County, not really moving much. But that's, at the end of the day, this is where I believe the electoral map would stand out for that matchup with J.D. Vance at 312 Electoral College votes to Newsom's, or to Pete Buttigieg's 226 Electoral College votes. So I actually do believe that Buttigieg would probably be a better candidate nationally than Newsom, believe it or not. And so if you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to hit that like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And I will see you guys in the next video.